is, by the way, called the tulip. Now, people started selling the tulip, of course, for its decorative, smells great, it looks great, you can decorate your home with tulips. But then a virus, which is called the mosaic virus, hit the tulips. It's a virus which basically changes the colors of the flowers. So rather than having one uniform color, they start getting a variation of colors. And the side benefit of that was that it was actually a beautiful virus. So it created really good looking flowers. And people started saying like, wow, this is going to be an amazing industry. And people started trading tulips. And then they started trading the earliest form of a derivative of a coin, which is the bulbs. So rather than the tulip itself growing up, you actually buy the bulbs and you trade with the bulbs. So people started trading with bulbs and the prices of bulbs started going up. And then you had people buying and stocking up bulbs, which created scarcity in the market because there's only so many bulbs at a given point in time. So then obviously that created a price hike, or the start of the bubble, and you can see that it hiked in price dramatically to the point where people were selling lands just to buy the right for reserves of tulip bulbs inside warehouses. And at one point in time, it just became too expensive, and at that point in time, the whole floor dropped and the whole market crashed. So that was one of the more well-known bubbles. And if we look at the anatomy of a typical bubble, it all starts with some kind of cool idea. You know, it takes off, and it goes up a little bit. Nowadays with cryptocurrency, it can go up not a little bit, but a lot bit. And then it may go down. Then it gets some media attention. It starts to go up. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and people always find the rationale why it's going up. And then, of course, greed kicks in, delusion that this is going to go up forever, of course, because, yeah, it's just great, and it's a paradigm shift, so that's why it's going to continue to go up. At one point, it's too expensive, unsustainable, and then the whole thing crashes. And that's the typical bubble story. So now comes the question of what's the market value of a cryptocurrency compared to its intrinsic value. And what do we mean by intrinsic value? Intrinsic value would be the value that a certain currency would receive if there was no real hype or there was no real marketing attention to it. So you can take, for example, a very simple story. If we would make a Starbucks coin, which is a coin that gives you a cappuccino, that's a pretty stable coin because you can get a cappuccino for that price and you know that that coin has intrinsic value. It's also not going to be overhyped because obviously it can't do much more than just give you a coffee, so it's going to be a rather stable coin. So what happens is that the market value for cryptocurrency is typically determined by two factors. One is the intrinsic value, and it's multiplied by the speculation factor, which is the hype factor in the market. Nowadays, about 98% of purchases of cryptocurrencies are bought because of speculations. Nobody really buys them for their utility, and therefore most of the prices that we see on CoinMarketCap is exactly a product of the speculative factor multiplied by a questionable intrinsic value. So therefore, most of the cryptocurrencies which have no intrinsic value, once the speculation factor reaches zero, so will their market value, and that's where they crash. So let's talk about another phenomena which is called the token velocity phenomena. Anybody's heard about this term, token velocity? Raise your hand. Okay. So let's take an imaginary situation where we're building a decentralized Uber. How cool is that? And this Uber is a decentralized Uber. Let's call it a duper. It's a decentralized Uber. So for you to ride in, I mean, obviously you're interested in the utility of this duper because you want to ride in a taxi and so on. You want to get from point A to point B. Now, Duber has introduced this coin which is called the Duber token, right? And you're going to be riding on Duber cars, which are fueled by the Duber tokens. So once you want to pick up a ride, you're going to buy Duber because you're not going to buy the Duber a month before because there's really no reason for you to hold on to a Duber unless you're actually planning to ride. So you're going to hop on that Duber, pay with that Duber. So within about a minute of you buying that Duber, you're giving away that Duber to the driver. The driver obviously needs to do his groceries at the supermarket. He's going to be paying with dollars, so he's going to sell that Duber immediately. What that basically means is that the token changes hands extremely fast, and that's called a very high token velocity. And that means that if we look at the total value of such a network of tokens, the value is diminished in a direct correlation to the velocity of the tokens. So if you have tokens which nobody really wants to hold on to, then their value is going to be dropping, or it's actually never going to be appreciating because it's just changing hands too fast. And therefore, at the end of the day, it's just simply a friction. Nobody really needs that cryptocurrency. So the other part of the spectrum is that you can't have a too low token velocity, because if everybody holds on to the token and nobody sells, then you have no market action, and that basically means that again, the value, it's all grinding into a halt. So you need to find some stable and some healthy token velocity to keep the market afloat and to keep the prices healthy. So there's some ways to reduce token velocity, and there's a few ICOs and a few products that have been doing that. The first one is a profit sharing mechanism. That's like the right to work. So there's an interesting token that's called Augur, where basically you need to buy sort of a taxi medallion in Augur coins so that you can actually enjoy yield from the network. So that basically means you need to hold on to your Augur tokens, and therefore there's a sort of a staking mechanism where you hold on to the token. And if prices start to drop, then people say, oh, it's a cheap token, I can make a lot of yield. They're going to buy that token, and that again equalizes the pricing upwards. Then there's some staking functions, like for example, we all know that Bitcoin is using proof of work, and that's caused this energy waste, and of course an arms race of supercomputing power all for nothing. So a lot of tokens are going through to proof of stake mechanisms, so a consensus by holding a certain amount of tokens. And that again, of course, reduces token velocity because people have a reason to actually hold on to the tokens. There's more models, like an insurance company which is going to be paying out in tokens. They actually need to hold money or tokens in the smart contract so that they can actually do the payout. So that again reduces token velocity. There's also gamification business models. So for example, having certain privileges, allowing to vote, things that basically the more tokens you hold, the more privileges or access or something fun or something that gives you some kind of utility in that system, and that again reduces token velocity. And of course the last one is the intrinsic store of value, and I'm getting those signals that I got 2 minutes to go. So intrinsic store of value, of course, is creating a token which really actually, and this is the most difficult one of them all, holds value. And how do you create that? Well, one of the people to talk about that is the chairman of Starbucks, who was asked what he thinks about tokens and cryptocurrency. He says, I like it, but I don't like the Bitcoin because it's got no intrinsic value. So I believe that there's going to be a token that's going to be backed up by industry, by brick and mortar shops, products and services. That token is going to be trusted by the public, and that is the type of token that me, as the chairman of Starbucks, actually believes in. So there's been a few, this is by the way a real token from Starbucks, just made of chocolate though. So there's been a few companies who started tokenizing, for example, their loyalty programs. And those loyalty programs have a very clear intrinsic value because you can upgrade your flight to business class or maybe buy a free seat on the airplane and so on. So by tokenizing that, Singapore Airlines was actually the first company to do that. AirAsia is now following, and there's some more companies like Iceland Air that have been talking about tokenizing their loyalty rewards program. Burger King in Russia has just launched the Whopper coin, right? which is another representative token, which is representing intrinsic inherent value in a token. However, if you want to really store intrinsic value in a token, there's a few things you need to follow. And first of all, there needs to be a very clear value. So we need to understand, without some kind of crazy business model, why does that token hold value? The second thing, it needs to be backed by a trusted entity. That could be a company we all trust and believe in, or some kind of other entity. It could be a city, municipality, a country, whatever. It needs to have liquidity. So it means that if Starbucks is launching a token, it better be on an exchange, otherwise there's no real liquidity. You're kind of stuck into the Starbucks network. It needs to be stable. People don't like volatility. They don't like finding out that a month after they bought something, it just dropped in price by 80%. CFOs of companies don't like it either. They don't like to find out that that token that they've given you as a loyalty rewards program is now just worth 100 times more because of some kind of pumping action in the market. It needs to be stable. And it also needs to be very convenient to use. So you can't just get stuck with that token. You actually need a mechanism to use it in a very simplistic manner. And then, of course, it needs to be compatible with the existing business models of those entities, whether it's a municipality where you can pay your taxes with that token, or if it's a company where you can buy products and services. They actually need to convert their thinking, mindset, and of course their business processes to latch on to this new token economy. And that's how you can actually create real intrinsic store of value. Now, this is I guess the pitchy part, but I'm not pitching though. So I represent a company, I'm the president of a company called Momentum. And what we actually do is we allow